Yes, my dear student friends, I welcome you all to this ASS family. First, let me introduce myself. Myself, Ravi Naik. I have done my master's in economics. At present, I am doing research in this economic subject only. Since 6 years, I am working in this college as lecturer in economics. Well, before getting to the syllabus, let me throw light on the result of our economics department in PUC secondary annual examination. Since 6 years, result of our economics subject is 95+%. Last year result was 95%. Ms. Shreya Kustgi created history in our subject by scoring 100 marks in economics for the first time. And there are 3 students who scored 98 marks in economics and 47 students who scored more than 85 marks in our economics subject. And the same student means Miss Shreya Kustgi, who is standing first to the district in the economics subject. So this is about the result of our economics department. So if I talk about the medium of instruction, means teaching in our college, we will teach in English as well as in Kannada. Most of times we use English language. First at PUC, you will have 2 textbooks. One is Statistics for Economics and the one is Indian Economic Development. So let us get into the textbooks. So let us take part A textbook, that is Statistics for Economics. So here you will have totally 9 chapters, such are Introduction, that is the first chapter. So here you will have totally 4 concepts, such are why economics, means why we need to study this economics, the meaning of consumption, production, distribution. So that is what we learn in this first sub concept. Thereafter, statistics in economics, means how that statistics works in the economics, that we learn in this concept. Thereafter, what is statistics? So different scholars have defined the statistics in their own views. Among we have taken 2 definitions. Those are statistics in singular sense, statistics in plural sense. Thereafter, what statistics does, what are the importance of this statistics, that is what we learn in this first chapter. So these concepts which we learn in first chapter, that is Introduction. Let us get into the second chapter, that is Correlation and Organization of Data. So here we learn the meaning of data. Thereafter, the types of data. So we all know there are 2 types of data. Means broadly we have categorized data into 2 types. One is primary data and the one is secondary data. Thereafter, methods of data collection. Okay. So there are various kinds of methods we can find in this chapter or in this concept, such as personal interview method, telephone interview method, and one more, that is mailing questionnaire method. So through these kinds of methods we can easily collect the data. So this is what we learn in the second chapter. In the same chapter we learn census and sample survey, census of India and NSSO. So these are the 2 institutions which working on the demography, means population. So when these institutions are established, and what are the functions of these institutions which we learn in this concept. Thereafter, sampling and non-sampling errors. So this is what we learn in this second chapter, that is collection and organization of data. Thereafter, the third chapter, that is organization of data. Here we learn the meaning of raw data, collection of data, types of data, such as continuous and discrete data. What is frequency distribution? What is bivariate distribution? So the third chapter, that is organization of data. So here we learn the meaning of the raw data and how we can segregate or how we can distribute the data in a different fashion or in different parts. So that is what we learn in this organization of data. Without organization of data, we cannot conduct future statistical analysis. No? That's why we should organize the data in a systematic manner. So that is what we learn here. So here various kinds of methods we can find, such as quantitative methods, qualitative methods, spatial and chronological method. So through these kinds of methods we can organize the data. So this is what we learn in this third chapter. Come at fourth chapter. So after collection, organization of data, we have to present those data. Okay, to understand the data in a first look, we should present that data in that kind of manner where that data should convey what that data says. So that is what we learn in this presentation of data. So that data we can present in different forms, like textual presentation, tabular presentation, and graphical presentation. So you all know what is text, what is table. So that is what we learn later. In that graphical presentation, we see various kinds of methods. Through those kinds of methods, we can present the collected data. So in that graphical presentation, we see some concepts like bar diagram. In that bar diagram, we see simple bar diagram, multiple bar diagram, component bar diagram. So these are three types of the bar diagrams which we see. So through these kinds of bar diagrams, we can present the collected data. Along with that bar diagram, we can find some more statistical methods, such as histograms, frequency polygon, Gaussian curve, and pie chart. So through these kinds of methods, we can present the data. So once we use diagrams, graphical presentations, so we can easily convey what the data says. So this is what we learn in this fourth chapter, that is presentation of data. Come at fifth chapter, that is measures of tendency. So here we see the data which are in raw form, so which we cannot handle, means which are too large. So if we talk about the census, if we talk about the data which comes under that NSSO report, so which are huge, no? So to condense those data, we use some statistical tools. Such tools are nothing but measures of tendency, measures of central tendency. So here we have some kinds of concepts. Through those kinds of concepts, we can condense the large data or huge data. Such concepts or statistical tools are arithmetic mean, median, mode. So these are the three main kinds of averages. So through these kinds of statistical tools, we can condense the huge data, or we can compress the huge data or the large data. So we can get the single value of the entire data. So this is what we learn in this measures of central tendency chapter. Along with this mean, median, mode, so we learn relative position of arithmetic mean, median, and mode, means a relative position of mean, relative position of median, mode. So this is what we learn in this measures of central tendency chapter. Come at sixth chapter, that is measures of dispersion. So this is the developed version of measures of central tendency. So here, so this is also one of the tools where we can condense the large amount of data. It means which we cannot handle easily, so such kind of data we can condense in a single number. We can get one representative value of entire data. So that is what we learn in this measures of tendency. So here also we are having a certain tools. Through those kinds of tools, we can get single value of entire data or the representative value of the huge data. Such concepts are range, means such statistical tools are range, quartile deviation, mean deviation, and standard deviation. So these are the four kinds of tools. Through these kinds of tools we can get a single value of the large data or the entire data. That is what we learn in this measures of central tendency. So here we find some kinds of concepts like the meaning of correlation, types of correlation, and techniques of measuring correlation. So that is what we learn in this correlation kind of chapter. Come at 8th chapter, that is index numbers. Here we learn the meaning of that index number, construction, how to construction of that index number. That is what we learn here. Some important index numbers we can find here. Hope you have heard terms like Sensex. Sensex is the abbreviation of sensitive index. CPI, consumer price index. WPI, wholesale price index. IIP, industrial. Issue in the construction of index numbers and index numbers in economics. This is what we learn in this 8th chapter. Come at 9th chapter, that is use of statistical tools. Here we find the same whatever we have learned in that first chapter, means here we see the meaning of the statistics and the importance of the statistics in economics. Okay, whatever so far we have discussed in our syllabus, no, means from first to 8th chapter, whatever we have discussed, no, that is what briefly said in this 9th chapter. So this is what the part A textbook, that is statistics for economics. So you have two textbooks, no, one means part A textbook, that is statistics for economics, no. Like you have one more kind of textbook, that is part B textbook, that is Indian economic development. So here you will have totally 10 chapters, such are Indian economy on the eve of independence. So here certain concepts are kept, like what kind of situations we faced, or what kind of situations we had in our economics under the rule of British, or when we were under the hands of British, no. So at the time, what kind of situations we faced in the economy, say in agriculture sector, industrial sector, foreign trade, demographic condition, occupational structure, and infrastructure. In these kinds of structures, how we exploited by the British government. So that is what we learn in this first chapter, that is Indian economy in the eve of independence. Come at the second chapter, that is Indian economy from 1950 to 1990. So this is the title of second chapter. So here we learn what kind of situations we had between 1950 to 1990, means after the independence and before the new economic policy. So at that particular period of time, so how we were, means what kind of measures we introduced to overcome the, or to bring development in the economy. So here certain concepts are kept, like the goals of 5-year plans. So we have 5-year plans. We had, not now, but earlier we had 5-year plans. About that concept we learn here the goals of 5-year plans: agriculture, industry, trade, and import substitution. About these we learn in this second chapter, that is Indian economy from 1950 to 1990. Come at third chapter, that is liberalization, privatization, globalization. So these are the concepts which we introduced in a new economic policy, which we brought in 1991. So on this we learn certain concepts in the third chapter, like the introduction to that new economic policy, background of that new economic policy. In that background, we study why we brought that new economic policy, or when we brought that new economic policy, and what kind of measures we brought in that liberalization concept, privatization concept, globalization concept. Thereafter, at last, Indian economy during reforms assessment. Yes, this is what we learn. It means whether we have succeeded in that LPG concept or not, that kind of we learn in the last concept of third chapter. Come at fourth chapter, that is poverty. So here we learn the introduction concept, means what is poverty and to whom we have to call that poor, how are the poor people are identified, the number of poor in India, what is census poverty, means how much poor people we are having in our India, that is what we learn, and what is census poverty, policy and programs towards alleviation of poverty. About that we learn in this fourth chapter. Come at fifth chapter, that is human capital formation in India. So here we learn certain concepts, or here we can find certain concepts like what is human capital, what is human capital formation, what are the sources of human capital, means there are various kinds of sources. Through those kinds of sources we can increase the number of human capital. There are 5 types of sources we can find, or 5 kinds of sources we can find to create that human capital, or to increase the amount or the number of human capital, such as expenditure on education, expenditure on health, expenditure on job training, expenditure on information, expenditure on migration. So these are the 5 kinds of or 5 types of sources. Through these kinds of sources we can increase the amount of human capital. Thereafter, human capital and human development. So here we learn the differentiates between human capital and human development. Thereafter, state of human capital formation in India. It means how much human capital we are having in our India. That is what we learn in this concept. Thereafter, education sector in India, means what kind of institutions we are having in India which are taking education sector. So this is what we learn in this 5th chapter. And last there is future perspectives. That is also we learn in this 5th chapter. And 6th chapter, that is rural development. So here we will learn certain concepts like the meaning of the rural development, credit and marketing in rural area, means the meaning of that credit and the institutions which are lending credit to the needy people, and what kind of institutions we are having to take care of rural development, and what is the market structure. So this is what we learn in this second concept. Agriculture marketing in rural area, diversification in to product activities. So this is what we learn here. Sustainable development and organic farming. So this is what we learn in this rural development kind of chapter. And 7th chapter, that is employment, growth, information and other issues. So here we see the meaning of workers and employment, participation of people in employment, self-employment and hired workers, to whom we are calling as self-employed and hired workers. That is what we learn in this concept. Employment in firms, factories and offices. About this we learn in this 7th chapter. Growth and changing structure of employment, informalization of Indian workforce, unemployment, the types of unemployment, government and employment generation. So these kinds of concepts which we learn in this 7th chapter. Come at 8th chapter, that is employment, growth, informalization and other issues. So here we learn what is infrastructure, relevance of infrastructure, types of infrastructure. We all know there are two types, like social infrastructure and economic infrastructure. About these we learn in this 8th chapter. State of infrastructure in India means how much social infrastructure and economic infrastructure we are having in our India. That is what we learn here. Along with that, energy, health, about also we learn in this 8th chapter. Come at 9th chapter, that is environment and sustainable development. So here we learn the meaning of environment, definition to that environment, and functions of that environment. That environment also doing certain functions. So that is what we learn here. State of India means in that environment, how that India, what kind of environment India has, that is what we learn in this concept. The meaning of sustainable development, strategies for sustainable development we find here. It means that kind of a concept also we learn in this 9th chapter. 10th chapter, that is comparative development expenses of India and its neighbors. So here we can see some concepts where we compare our India to the China and Pakistan, like development path, snapshot view, demographic indicators like education, health, and some other kinds of concepts which we compare with the Pakistan and India, Pakistan and China countries, and the GDP of Pakistan, China and India indicates of human development. So what kind of ranks that those neighbor countries are having in that human development index. That is what we learn here. Development statistics and appraisal. So this is what we learn in this 10th chapter. So these are the some chapters which kept in your first year PUC. Department has yet not said about the reduction of the syllabus. So till the announcement of the reduction of the syllabus, we should keep in our mind that we have totally 19 chapters. So in that view only we have to work here.